Most people think the 50-30-20 rule is simple math. 50% of your income for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings. You've probably seen this budget formula plastered across every personal finance blog and Instagram infographic. It looks clean, straightforward, almost foolproof. But here's what nobody mentions. 90% of people who try this rule fail within 3 months. And the problem isn't discipline, it's that they're making three critical mistakes that turn a simple framework into financial chaos. Let me show you what actually happens when someone discovers the 50-30-20 rule. They get excited. They open a spreadsheet or download a budgeting app. They calculate their after-tax income and divide it accordingly. Then reality hits. Their rent alone consumes 45% of their income. Their car payment, insurance, and groceries push needs past 60%. Suddenly, the formula doesn't work, and they assume the problem is their income. Too low, not enough wiggle room. They abandon the entire approach and go back to winging it. The first mistake is treating needs as fixed and unchangeable. When you look at your current spending and try to force it into the 50% needs category, you're working backwards. The rule isn't designed to validate your existing lifestyle. It's designed to show you what sustainable spending actually looks like. That distinction matters more than anything else I'll tell you today. Most people categorize their spending based on how it feels, rather than what it actually is. Your rent feels like a need because you need shelter. Your car payment feels like a need because you need transportation. Your phone bill, your internet, your streaming services, they all feel necessary because you use them daily. But necessity and current spending level are completely different concepts. A need is the minimum required version of something essential. Shelter is a need. A two-bedroom apartment in an expensive neighborhood might be a want dressed up as a need. Transportation is a need. A car with a $400 monthly payment when a $200 payment would work just as well as partially a want. The internet is arguably a need in modern life. The highest speed tier plus 4 streaming services are wants. The brutal truth is that most people's needs category is polluted with wants that have been rationalized into necessities. This pollution destroys the entire framework before you even start allocating the other percentages. You can't build a functional budget on a broken foundation. Here's how to fix it. List every single expense you currently categorize as a need. Then ask yourself a specific question for each one. If my income dropped by 30% tomorrow, could I reduce this expense and still survive? Not comfortably, not happily, just survive. If the answer is yes, you're looking at spending that contains discretionary elements. That exercise reveals something uncomfortable. Your true needs are probably closer to 35 or 40% of your income, not 50. The difference between what you're spending and what you actually need represents lifestyle inflation that's been misclassified. Once you see that gap clearly, you have options. You can keep the spending and acknowledge it as wants, or you can reduce it and free up resources for actual financial priorities. The second mistake is even more common and somehow less obvious. People treat the wants category as permission to spend 30% of their income on whatever feels good. They hit their number and feel virtuous. They're following the rule. They're being responsible. Except the wants category isn't a spending target. It's a maximum threshold, and there's a massive difference. When you view 30% as a target, you unconsciously spend up to that limit. You find ways to use the full allocation because it's there and the budget says you can. A dinner out here, new clothes there. That thing you've been eyeing online. The purchases feel justified because you're staying within your designated percentage. But this is exactly how people end up with full wants buckets and empty savings accounts that never grow beyond the minimum 20%. The wants category should function as a buffer, not a mandate. Some months you'll spend 25%, other months 15%. The goal is to keep wants as low as reasonably possible while maintaining genuine life satisfaction, then redirect the difference to savings. This approach transforms the rule from a static formula into a dynamic tool that accelerates wealth building. Think about what happens over time with these two approaches. Someone who consistently spends the full 30% on wants saves exactly 20%. Their financial progress is steady but limited. Someone who keeps wants at 20% and pushes savings to 30% builds wealth 50% faster with the exact same income. Over a decade, that difference compounds into an entirely different financial reality. But there's a third mistake that's more insidious than the other two combined, and it's the one that causes the most long-term damage. Most people never actually track which category their spending falls into after the initial setup. They create the budget, feel good about having a plan, then spend money without consistently categorizing it. This is where the 50-30-20 rule goes from useful framework to complete fiction. Without categorization, you're flying blind. A charge hits your account and you mentally file it somewhere, usually under whatever category makes you feel best about the spending. That restaurant bill becomes a need because you had to eat. The new shoes become a need because work requires professional attire. The subscription service becomes a need because you use it regularly. This rationalization turns the framework into theater. You're performing budget discipline without actually practicing it. The percentages become meaningless when you're arbitrarily deciding which bucket each expense falls into based on how you feel that day. The solution requires something most people hate: manual tracking with brutal honesty. Every single purchase gets assigned to a category in real time, not retroactively. You don't get to reinterpret spending after the fact to make the numbers work. This means looking at that dinner out and calling it what it is: a want. Looking at the premium streaming bundle and acknowledging that basic internet would satisfy the actual need. Looking at the car payment on a vehicle with features you never use and recognizing that transportation is the need. Everything else is preference. The tracking reveals patterns that destroy the illusion of control. You'll discover your wants aren't 30%, they're 45%. Your needs aren't actually 50%. They're 38% when you strip away the lifestyle padding. Your savings isn't 20%. It's whatever's left after you've spent on everything else, which some months is 7%. Now you have real data instead of comfortable fiction, and real data enables actual decisions. Here's where the framework becomes powerful instead of performative. You use the true percentages as your starting point and build a plan to gradually shift toward the target ratios. Not overnight, not through willpower alone, through systematic category migration. Start with the easiest wins. Find expenses currently classified as needs that contain obvious discretionary elements. The phone plan with unlimited everything when you barely use data. The premium cable package when you watch 3 channels. The oversized living space when 2 bedrooms would genuinely suffice. These aren't about deprivation, they're about alignment. You're not eliminating the need. You're removing the want that's been bundled with it and misclassified for convenience. Each reclassification frees up money that can flow somewhere more valuable, either to genuine wants you've been denying yourself, or to savings that compound into actual financial security. The process takes months, sometimes years. You don't flip a switch and suddenly hit 50-30-20 perfectly. You chip away at the gap between where you are and where the framework suggests you should be. But something shifts during this process that matters more than the percentages themselves. You develop awareness of what you're actually spending on and why. You stop operating on autopilot and start making conscious choices about resource allocation. That consciousness is worth more than perfect adherence to any formula. Someone who tracks their spending honestly and maintains a 45-35-20 split is building more wealth than someone who claims to follow 50-30-20 but doesn't actually track anything. The framework also needs periodic recalibration as life circumstances change. A 25-year-old single person has different legitimate needs than a 40-year-old supporting 3 kids. The percentages that work during accumulation years shift during retirement. What counts as a need evolves as health considerations enter the picture. This flexibility is a feature, not a weakness. The framework provides structure while allowing adaptation to reality. You're not locked into fixed percentages forever. You're using them as guideposts that inform decisions without dictating every detail. What matters is the underlying principle. Spend less than you earn. Prioritize actual necessities over preferences. Save enough to build security and options. Control wants instead of letting wants control you. The specific numbers matter less than the discipline of separating spending into categories and ensuring savings happens consistently. Someone following 45-30-25 with rigorous tracking builds more wealth than someone claiming 50-30-20 while spending randomly and hoping the percentages work out. The final insight that transforms this from budget rule to wealth building system is understanding what the 20% savings actually represents. It's not just money sitting in an account, it's compressed freedom, stored optionality, future flexibility in tangible form. Every dollar saved is a dollar that can't be demanded by your current lifestyle. It exists independent of your job, your routine, your circumstances. It gives you room to make choices that prioritize well-being over income, to take risks that require a financial cushion, to weather disruptions that would devastate someone living paycheck to paycheck. That 20% is buying something more valuable than any physical possession. It's buying the ability to say no to employers who demand too much, to opportunities that pay well but cost your peace, to emergencies that would otherwise become crises. The person who actually saves 20% for a decade has options the person who spends everything will never access. Not because they earn more, because they kept more. And keeping more requires exactly what the 50-30-20 framework demands when applied honestly. Know what you truly need. Control what you merely want. Save what you'll eventually depend on. The percentages are just scaffolding around those principles. Get the principles right, and the specific numbers become far less critical than consistent application over time. The three mistakes we covered today share a common thread. They all involve lying to yourself about what's really happening with your money. Treating wants as needs is lying. Viewing 30% as a spending target instead of a limit is lying. Not tracking your categories honestly is lying. The 50-30-20 rule only works when you stop the self-deception and face what the numbers actually show.